Hi, everybody, and welcome to my talk. They told me I could be anything, so I became a sim. There are my contact details. Feel free to write them down if you'd like to contact me about anything like future talk. But for now, who am I? Why would you want to contact me? My name is Penelope Davison. I'm a game designer at EA Fire Monkeys working on The Sims Freeplay. Small disclaimer, this talk is by me. All opinions and content is not representative of EA or the Fire Monkeys. So what is this talk? Well, the theme play-by-play this year is unconventional alchemy. And this is a theme that does resonate with me. On the surface, I have a pretty conventional journey into games, but in reality, it's been a little bit of an unconventional adventure through odd niches and avenues that somehow brought me closer and closer to where I am today. Through the unexpected combinations of experiences from my life, I have been oddly equipped for this journey into becoming specifically a designer on The Sims Freeplay. And a lot of the way I think about design is also informed by this journey. I like the quote from Finding Nemo, which is all drains lead to the ocean, because that's how my journey has kind of felt. Every unexpected tangent has led me inexorably back to the same outcome. And so that's what this talk is about. My talk is about the unconventional alchemy in my life that has unwaveringly pulled me into becoming, very specifically again, a game designer on The Sims Freeplay. It's about how my experiences have contributed back into the game in different ways, some ideas about how we can use unconventional alchemy in our own lives, and some of the hot takes I've been left with about game design as a result. So here we go. Getting started, here is one view of my journey into games. Looks pretty boring, straightforward, right? Studied games at uni, and I interned at a game company, in this case it was Zero Latency, before interning again at EA, and voila, I'm working at EA. In truth, it's only about half the story, and if we look at this alone, it's not a very interesting story to tell. Beyond that, so much of what influences how I approach design doesn't come from these steps at all. So let's take another look. Origin story. This is me as a kid, just one in the middle, but don't worry, you will get my entire life story. But I love this photo because it's me and my siblings having fun on a pretty old computer there, playing games on the Barbie website. I was lucky enough to be surrounded by games when I was growing up, so there was never a time when I wasn't fascinated by them and in awe of whoever was creating them. How did they do it? I had no idea. When I was little, I decided that I wanted to be specifically a video game maker because I definitely didn't know the word developer back then. Unfortunately, as I got older, I lost confidence in my ability to actually become a video game maker. And so that's actually why I ended up doing a lot of things that weren't games for a long time. So what ended up happening between this photo here and now that's led me back into games where I feel like I belong. I want you to picture for a moment some of the experiences that you should or could have on the path to becoming a game designer. Or, whatever profession you want to think about instead. And that's fine, just sub that in instead. Just think about what those experiences might be. Were any of these on your list? No? Just checking. All of these things are things that have, in one way or another, led me to becoming a game designer for The Sims, or they've informed my work as a designer. So where should we start? For my bingo card here, the first of my experiences is rockets don't have ears. Rockets don't have ears. So this is actually a reference to my first job, which was as a swim teacher. I was good enough at the job, but it wasn't very good for me. The stress of it and the responsibility of the safety was a lot. And I didn't really know how to act around kids. But I learned some really good things out of it and had some pretty good experiences too. One of the cutest moments I can remember was teaching one once-year-old child that they needed to tuck their chin in for rocket arms so that their ears were covered by their arms, like you can see in this photo, to which they gleefully exclaimed, "Because rockets don't have ears." I went from frustrated out of my mind to dying from cuteness overload in about 0.2 seconds. But rockets not having ears wasn't the only thing I learned from swim teaching. If you didn't know, thankfully you do actually go through some training before you become a swim teacher, and something my school really focused on, student active time. Everyone has probably had that experience in dodgeball or a similar game where you've struck out and you're stuck waiting on the sidelines waiting to get back into the game. Or maybe a couple of other students are much higher skill level than you and hogging the ball, so you don't have much to do either. In swim training, they emphasize getting your students used to autonomously looping themselves. For example, starting their next lap when the person in front of them reaches a certain cone, to prevent the students from sitting around doing nothing. If they spend 5 minutes a class sitting around when they should have been practicing, that's 20% of their half-hour lesson wasted per class, or 10% of an hour-long PE class. That builds up over time and means the student isn't getting the value that they should be or that they paid for. So how does this idea lead back into games? A recently featured creative map in Fortnite actually showcases this idea really well. In the Color Dash game mode, where players try to be the last car standing on a shrinking amount of colored platforms, once the player is eliminated, if they, got sent to their doom, they're returned to a plaza while the surviving players continue to battle it out in the cars. So if you look at the photo on the right there, you can see the player can choose to watch the rest of the game, but the creators have also provided a series of mini games or experiences, which are through both portals, that the defeated player can amuse themselves with and hang out with the other players in the meantime. And it's super duper fun. Instead of sitting around bored waiting for the next match, you just end up having a silly time running around with your friends or being a bit of a goose. This simple choice of adding something to do for the players who were eliminated, so you're not wasting their time, you're respecting the player's time, made this method stand out from others of this type and elevated the overall quality of the game experience by a substantial margin. I've also used this idea when I've been had times when I've been able to influence how a game came out. When I was interning with Zero Latency, the free roam virtual reality studio, I worked as a game master watching people play their VR games before I did the internship. And it really stood out to me how some players did or didn't engage with the game. Players who were more used to VR or video games in general would often defeat all the enemies before less experienced players would have a chance to even notice them. And when all players are paying quite a lot to play the session, any minute the less experienced players spent not really doing anything or not being given a chance to engage in the game represented bang for their buck that they weren't necessarily getting. So while giving feedback on their first PvP title, Soul Betas, it came to mind again. I didn't want lesser experienced players standing around as cannon fodder for the better players. I suggested a secondary goal to allow for alternate types of playstyles. While the more forthright players could still charge ahead, mopping up the other team, players who preferred a support role, or maybe just needed a bit more time to figure out what's going on, still had something they could do in the form of moving a central bomb back into enemy territory and defending their own base. So you can kind of see it in this gift here. There's that ball in the middle, the players are shooting it and it moves going into the enemy's territory. So that's our first experience. Kids don't have ears, and now it's fed back into game design. Let's move on to our next experience. A literal bomb. All right, so my next job after swim teaching was at Michelle's Patisserie, which is a cafe, if you've never seen it, and it's where I learned to be a barista. Here are a couple of photos of me looking like an extremely awkward teen, eating behind the counter on 2 separate occasions. So I love this job and took it very seriously, but a part that helped my games career, tangentially at least, was after I'd become a senior staff member. And I was watching one of the junior staff members who was lovely, but pretty shy and very timid 14-year-old. We were just working as usual when all of a sudden there was a huge bang out of nowhere. I don't remember much, but I do remember once seeing that there was no immediate danger, but my coworker had been launched into a frightened panic attack. I sat her down behind the counter, held her hands for a while, and talked her through her breathing and just made sure that she was okay. Later on, we found out that someone had set off a homemade bomb at the Donut King from the upstairs food pod. So, bit of an odd experience, but how did it contribute to my games career? Well, let's just say there would be 1 or 2 particular job interviews when I was asked to give an example of how I'd acted, an example of a time when I'd acted well under pressure, and being able to say that I looked after a coworker after a literal bomb had gone off definitely turned that interview around, and what cinched in a pivotal part of me getting into games. I'll talk a bit more about that job later. One side note, as of me recording and writing this talk on the 25th of June 2022, I actually learned that it wasn't a bomb, and it was actually an accidental explosion of a bag of cat gun ammunition that some guy had on his person for a party. But I literally only learned that this week. So for the last few years, I've been using it and telling people I've gone through a real bomb explosion, which, again, for full transparency, turns out was false, but it still helped me in some interviews until now. Moving right along. So while we're talking about shelf patisserie, around that time, as a hobby, I was also really into fencing, which brings us to our next card, stabbing people with a sword. Totally good-natured stabbing. I did fencing when I was in high school and college. As an art-inclined student, I found more and more friends in life would ask me to help make logos or design posters and stuff. For example, on the far left here, you can see this Ben 10 and plus Spider-Man picture I once did for my boss's son. I didn't mind it that much that people were asking that of me, and as a young, broke kid, I sure did like that people were willing to pay me for it. So doing posters and stuff like that led to me doing this logo that you can see on the far right. It's on that white, very fashionable yellow t-shirt, which is a logo that I made that some fencing people used for the volunteer shirts for a couple of different competitions. And at the time, this was a really exciting thing. People were wearing my art and would pay me for it. Maybe this graphic design thing had something to it. And so because of people asking me at the time to make some posters, logos here and there, you know, school, fencing, other things, I actually ended up studying graphic design. This is because at the time I was still too scared to study games like I wanted to. It was too scary to try learning games and failing. And graphic design was already, you know, it was already making me money. It felt like it was going somewhere. So that's what I decided to try doing. So that brings me to graphic design, which is where I first studied the idea of design as a concept. And coming in as a boisterous teen who wanted to draw stuff and make games, honestly, I didn't really get it, especially at the beginning. And I'll be the first to admit I wasn't the best at graphic design. For example, you can still see games on my mind when I designed the logo and business card on the left, which definitely isn't strongly influenced by a pom pom. Wink, wink. But anyway, it wasn't all a waste. I got some things out of it. And there's one specific moment that I still think about and it really sticks out to me. So when some of my instructors were trying to explain design as a concept, I remember them saying that design is the solution to a problem. And when I heard that, I thought it was the silliest thing I'd ever heard. Like, what problem? How is a logo problem solving? To me, you just make the logo look good, you know, suit a business, and we're done. I was so used to a problem being defined as something very explicit and literal. For example, maths problem like 43 times 31, what does that equal? That the very idea of a conceptual problem was beyond me. I had no idea what this sentence meant and still had no idea what design was, even as I continued my studies in both graphic and games design later on. Despite not understanding it, I kept thinking about this concept, at first with contempt, and more with curiosity as some years went by. So we'll come back to this one. So we're talking about graphic design, and that leads me to my next experience, which is Andrew Denton. For those of you who might not know, Andrew Denton is an Australian media and TV presenter, / comedian, / producer, / you know, all of that sort of thing. While I was studying graphic design, I went to a media and design conference where Andrew Denton was one of the speakers. I don't remember much about his talk, excuse me, but one thing that really stuck with me was this. Something he said was, "We are all communicating at an unknown rate." I don't remember the context he was speaking to at the time, but I do remember that it's along the lines of how much we understand something when we're exposed to it. For example, if I'm trying to explain something, even right now during this speech, I can't assume you understand exactly 100% of what I'm saying or what I'm trying to communicate to you. There's a chance only 20% of my intended meaning is being understood. Maybe another person listening is only getting 10%, who knows? I don't know the rate at which my communication of a concept or an idea or anything is successful. And that's the important part to be thinking about. We're probably all used to writing essays where you have to repeat yourself a few times to get the point across. For example, you state your argument in the intro, you then write about it in a paragraph, and you write it again in the conclusion. I see that as being an example of combating this problem in this idea. If you understand or understood my point only 10% the first time I say it, and then you understand it 30% more the second time you hear me reinforce the concept, then in the end, good communication isn't just stating something once and assuming it's understood. It's reinforcing the concept through different ways or different repetitions to really make sure that there's true comprehension. So good communication is understanding that it's not a one and done solution. And we've already covered earlier that design is the solution to a problem. All we need now to understand design a bit better is a missing link between the two statements. And that is that design is communication. So I've heard this said when I studied game design, and guest speaker Timothy Best gave his answer to what is game design. I agree with him. Game design is about communication in so many ways. It's either communicating concepts and rules to your player, or maybe it's about communicating concepts to your team instead, or talking ideas between disciplines. And sometimes this idea intrigues me. So much of my job as a designer was talking to people about their work that they were doing better. And, I can't do their job for them. They were the expert. So why do they really need me here being the middleman? Was I really contributing anything to the team? Short answer, yes. It turns out design is important. But design's often also the glue that holds the concept together, whether it's a game, a brand, an experience, everything and anything. Design is often discovering the solution to a problem. For example, adding an upgrade system to solve a lack of long-term goals in the game, then communicating that solution through every way necessary. Players won't necessarily know you've added an upgrade system if you just tell them about it once. That's bad design. You don't know how much they'll internalize it. So how can you communicate it as a holistic package within the context of the game? Sometimes it might be adding, badging to draw attention to it. It might be pop-ups that come up in certain areas. It might be context-sensitive prompts. Who knows? That's all part of the design solution. So design is the solution to a problem, but also the communication of that solution, ending up as a cohesive, holistic communication that all delivers the same message. It's also, I guess, how you can tell the difference between good design and bad design. If it's good design, then everything's working together to hopefully be telling the same message, and it's telling a cohesive message. If things are pulling you in different directions, coming up at times where it's not necessarily needed, then that signs that you might be starting to get a little bit astray in the design of your own work. It's focusing on that main problem space. So anyway, if we move along, we're starting to understand design, or at least how I personally see it. But in our little timeline here, I'm no closer to getting into games. So remember earlier I was talking about that job interview that the bomb experience helped me ace? Well, that experience leads me into the next job I had after studying graphic design, and the next experience on the bingo board. Santa versus Elves punch-up. So my next job was as an area supervisor of Santa photography. Here's a photo of me, I'm on the left there, with my sister and my brother who's photoshopped in because he was interstate at the time. I got this job because I'd studied photography and related technology when I was studying graphic design. And I was pretty good at customer service for my barista days, but also I had experience teaching, swim teaching. So these are three very specific skill sets that were all needed to get this job. So you can see how everything's kind of coming together. Plus, again, that anecdote about the bomb really meant that they trusted that I could be in charge during stressful circumstances and be okay. So as the area supervisor, I have to hire, train, and manage around 50 or so staff members, including Santa characters, in around 7 Santa photography sets over the Christmas season, which was indeed a very stressful job. Some of the things that stood out to me, however, is first of all, that this was the first time that I was introduced to the idea of user experience. When I was training for the position, I'd never actually been to a Santa photography set before. I'd never had my photo taken with Santa until then. And I had no idea how it was supposed to run. You know, where do people line up? Do you pay first? Do you pay at the end, etc.? When I was training, they had a flow chart that explained the steps, step by step, that the customer was supposed to go through. They would line up, they would be greeted by a customer service assistant, then they would be brought on set, then they'd be led to the cash register, etc. It was not to me at the time, but now it's something I use almost day to day when trying to explain how the feature in my game would look and behave. The second thing that stood out to me was one of my Santas. He was a little bit different from most of the other Santas. He smoked, he wouldn't stop swearing on set, he had tattoos that were all covered up by Santa outfit, and was a bit of a strong personality, shall we say. He was truly a bit of a rebel Santa, but working on a regional set, there weren't really any other people that we could use to replace him. It turns out Santa Clauses are hard to find. So if you look like Santa or have any interest in being one, you can get on that pretty easily. So I'm always looking for more Santa Clauses. But anyway, he was on a regional set, so he was basically irreplaceable, and as such, he became a bit of a diva. He and the elves on his set did not get along until eventually on Christmas Eve, I ended up getting a phone call because he'd gotten into a fight with one of the elves. It had gotten physical, and now they were all refusing to work with one another. I can't remember much about what happened next, but I'm pretty sure I ended up tearing all of them a bit of a new one and asked them, or managed to get them to get it together. Literally one last day for the kids so they could get their photo with Santa. In the end, though, this experience, while stressful and a bit stunning at the time, it did provide some pretty good inspiration when I was writing the 2019 Christmas quest for the Sims 3 player. So this is an example of putting myself and my experiences back into games. This quest was the first quest that I'd written, and it was very exciting, even if it was a surprising amount of work. I had a lot of fun, but it was definitely inspired by my real-life biker rebel Santa. Some of the quest highlights are the moment you're trying to beg a breakdancing, too cool for school Santa to come home from the dance club, and another moment in the quest when the elves go on strike and refuse to work with Santa due to the poor working conditions. Players love these moments in the game, and if you've played it and wondered how they came to be, this is why. Because of my own experiences with a volatile diva Santa Claus and elf relations. Anyway, after the whole Santa photography fiasco, apart from giving me inspiration to use in future quest writing, working with tech in a customer-facing environment actually gave me a huge edge when applying for my next job, which was working as a game master at aforementioned free roam virtual reality studio, Zero Latency. So here's a couple of pictures of it. On the left, you can see me at work. This is a team that I got along really well with. They wanted a photo with me at the end. So my job here was while I was studying games. And I was teaching people how to use the equipment at Zero Latency, and I would run them through a session. Similar to when you go to a paintball place, you have that guide who takes you through, teaches you how to use the equipment and how to play the game, and then they watch the game to make sure they go okay. That was my job within VR. This was the first kind of obvious professional step I took towards working in games, because while they had the warehouse games that the players came in and played, it was because the content team created the games here in Melbourne. So the dev team was in Melbourne as well, not just the operations team. So I was working in the operations team at the time, but even getting that job on the operations staff was extremely competitive. That having the tech experience of working with the Santa sets and all the related equipment in a live environment along with studying games at university at this point, made all the professional difference in getting hired. So I worked as a game master for a couple of years before my manager actually helped me set up an internship with the content team instead of the operations team to help me out. This was an amazing event because you don't normally do internships. So it was a bit of a favor of the company to me, and I'm still very grateful for it. And this was my first professional games experience. So you'll remember this gift that I showed earlier. Again, this is just one of the main things I was working on at the time. And it was awesome to be able to get my first bit of true design experience. But something that I think was really cool when I reflect back on it is that my experience in graphic design was still able to help me here in a professional setting. So in exchange for letting me take part in their testing and game iterating and, letting me be there as a good game design intern, I was also able to help them in other ways, like help concepting logos, like the Soul Raiders logo that you see there, also creating flyers and video editing and bits and pieces like that. So it boggles my mind how much of my previous experience contributed to this internship, both in working on Santa sets, studying graphic design, and swim teaching. Everything seemed to lead up to me getting that internship here. So while we're talking about teaching, it would be a little remiss of me not to mention the other thing I used to teach, which was parkour. So I used to train and teach parkour as well, which is a really fun movement activity. And the percentage of nerds in parkour influenced by games like Prince of Persia and things like that is extremely high. So it's a really fun community to be part of as well, with lots of like-minded souls. It's easy to think of parkour as impressive or dangerous, cool, these photos make it look, but what's a little bit more realistic is this. A whole lot of silliness. It's a whole lot of unstructured experimentation and trying to move the body in new, interesting ways. A lot of the fun of parkour for me and friends would be giving each other silly challenges. Instead of practicing the same jump that's maybe too easy now, often you'd make a challenge harder by giving it a bit of a twist. Sure, you can jump from here to there, but can you do it with one leg? Can you do it backwards? Can you do it with a 360 spin in the middle? Can you still balance on this object if you do it with your eyes closed? A big part of learning to teach and give people increasing challenges, but also to self-train with learning how to use an existing environment in new and interesting ways. It was learning how to play again as an adult and how to form new challenges based on adding or removing specific elements. And a lot of this playfulness and flexible thinking is still how I approach game design today. It's basic level design 101 to teach a mechanic and present that mechanic twist in the next level. But you can also use it in your brainstorming. How does this feature change if combined with this element over here? What if you remove it? What unusual combination of mechanics will make a challenge interesting again in a new and maybe unusual way? Design is about finding solutions to a problem, and play in parkour is often about creating new fun challenges within that problem space by adding unexpected new elements. So we can see the theme of unconventional alchemy starting to creep back in. So let's have a look at this alchemy in a problem space in a different way, maybe a more official way. Welcome to Synectics. What do you, by this one assignment I had to do back in graphic design? What are Synectics? Well, they are a method of brainstorming and problem solving, often done in a group setting. At its core, Synectics is very simple. Combine two unrelated things to reach a third, new or novel outcome. The strength of Synectics is that it forces you to think in new ways and really stretch your creativity. The greater diversity of people brainstorming together, the more productive the Synectic session will be because of the greater range of experiences that the group can draw on. This might sound familiar, as one of the reasons why a company that employs a diverse range of people will often outperform a homogeneous group. They don't have the same creative limitations and have a better range of experiences and ideas to draw upon. This combination of elements may also sound familiar as a formal way of explaining play, like we just talked about in parkour. Combining odd challenges in parkour creates an exciting new challenge. So this is an example of what that might look like in parkour. You might have a jump, you add the challenge of no knee bend, and what you end up with is a playful drill to help practice your arm swings. It's quite necessary to get through larger chunks. You can also use the idea of Synectics to help in processing new ways, for example. To help you process things in new ways. For example, if you take a walk somewhere new, or you're trying a new food. So, if you have your coworkers, you try doing work somewhere else, or maybe go to a walk in the zoo where nobody, probably in a work setting, nobody goes very often. And then it brings you new ideas from these fresh experiences. Or if we maybe look at the more traditional method of synectics, then we start by stating our problem space, combining it with something random and unexpected, and figuring out how they can work together. So this is probably the truest example of synectics and how it can work. So the idea is, as the example here goes, the problem might be getting children interested in learning math. The unexpected element that we're adding into it is, for example, Lego. If we combine the two, you just make it up. What's a way that you can make these two things make sense together? So as an example solution, the outcome of this might be helping kids be more interested in maths is like having Lego, because you can't make big Lego castles without using lots of little pieces or skills to lay strong foundations. So this can help you create new metaphors and new ways of thinking about a problem. And you can see how if you're trying to come up with a brand campaign or an awareness campaign of getting kids interested in math, this might be a new way of going about it that wouldn't have come about probably by brainstorming in maybe a more traditional way. So that's where parkour came into my journey. So what about the other items on my list? How does Tibet fit into this picture? So this snippet, this bingo piece, was from when I applied to EA to be an intern for the first time. I was leaving Australia to travel China, Tibet, and Nepal, which was partially for uni, when my application to EA started. I completed my design test during an all-nighter, and so I was flying out of the country the day after receiving it. While staying in a hostel at the edge of China, waiting for my trip into Tibet, I had my interview. The only place that looked somewhat respectable, as it was a video call, was behind the front desk. So I took the interview behind the desk in a hostel, hoping that no one would come around. I had the hostel puppy on my lap, as you can see from this picture here, such an adorable little kid. But tough not to let it distract me during the interview. During the interview, I had to tell fellow guests that no, I didn't know why the hot water wasn't working. And during the interview, I also ended up getting blocked by Microsoft. I assumed because my VPN or Skype activity at the time was suspicious, and I somehow flagged. So I would have thought that this was a pretty disastrous way to be interviewed for my first real job in games. But when I talked to my manager about it later, it turns out it wasn't all bad. Me traveling at the time made me memorable, and I seemed like a more interesting, diverse candidate. That, combined with an otherwise successful interview, despite all the little things that went wrong, meant I did end up getting this job, my first full-time internship and job in the industry. And that leaves us with our final bingo card. Angsty teenage poetry. So I wrote a lot of angsty teenage poetry in high school. I also used to draw a lot, and it made sense. I was the arty student who loved reading and creative writing. Turns out it became useful when contributing back to The Sims. I learned how to use Photoshop because I was super into 90s anime and DeviantArt at the time, and I was able to use these skills to help make art assets in The Sims Freeplay when we didn't have any spare artist time, but we sure did have designer time. I made iconic Sims character Bella Goth's dress for an event, and it applied in our game. But you can see the dress that I made on the left there. And I also made the outfit for Izzy Fabulous. He was the pink-haired character on the right. So this was really exciting. Even though I was hired on this project as a game designer, I was still able to use the art skills that I'd learned both as a kid who was really into anime at the time, learning Photoshop, but also I'd honed that skills when learning graphic design. And now it's here contributing back into The Sims in ways that maybe other designers couldn't, because they didn't have that same art background. Another part of my past that I never would have expected would have come in handy was, again, the angsty teenage poetry itself. the creative writing came in useful when I was writing that Christmas quest that I was talking about before. Turns out it was also the tradition to write poems every day of the quest as a bit of something cute, a bit of a recap for the player. So even that creative part of me would end up contributing to my job as a designer. I had no idea that all the random things I would do in my life would build up into reaching my dream job. And it still boggles my mind today how even the smallest things, like loving writing in high school or drawing anime fan art, would all end up contributing one way or another to my overall skill set as a designer. In this graphic here too, again, you can kind of see how the experiences are building into each other. I started with swim coaching and swim teaching, where I learned, the intro teaching stuff. Then I started parkour coaching, which was also teaching. Started studying graphic design, which was design and photography. Then the science of photography stuff came around because of that experience in teaching and photography, but introduced tech into a professional environment. This led into Zero Latency Part 1, which is when I was working as a game master, which involved, once again, that teaching background, but also that tech experience. I started studying my Bachelor of Design, game design at RMIT, to formalize my games experience, which led me into getting my short internship in Zero Latency, which I was able to use my graphic design experience and start getting that game design experience. This all finally led into the internship at EA, and then the final job that I'm still working now as game designer at EA. And the beauty of all of it is that hopefully it'll just keep going. In last year alone, I've had a huge range of new experiences. I've gotten engaged. Me and my partner bought a house. We adopted a dog. His name is Rufus. He's the love of my life. And I started a business. Who knows whatever other weird and wonderful stuff will keep happening and find its way back into The Sims or whatever games they end up working on in the future. There's more to life than games, but I sure hope that any game I make will still be filled to the brim with life. So thank you everybody for listening to my talk. Once again, here are my details in case you have any questions or want to follow up, but I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.